Okay, let's talk about Stephanie McMahon. What were her roles in WWE or WWF, sort of as the years went by in the 2000s? Was she always backstage from, because you joined WWF in like what, June of 99, July 99?
June 99.
Yeah, what were her
June
roles
99.
back then, and how did they sort of evolve over time?
I couldn't quite put my finger on, like, as far as what her role was at first. All I think it was just like with Shane. You know, and I give Vince credit for this. He had his kids working in every department, everything from the ring crew to the whatever department in the office, and doing every job within WWE to learn the business. When she was there, I'm assuming it was at the tail end of her. When I got there in 99, they had already done all the ministry stuff, the corporate ministry, and him being the person, you know, it was me, Austin, me all along. She was part of that angle. And then she just seemed to be backstage when I was there. Not full time, but as time went on, and then they made her, I forget the actual title. They made her like vice president of creative or something like that.
Yeah, something like that.
I'm not sure. But then she was there. And then obviously I remember when Hunter went through the pallet that had the nail in it at the Garden versus Mick Foley. Remember that versus Cactus?
Oh, the Rumble.
He had a puncture, yeah, in the match against him. I remember when he was on the stretcher afterwards and they were looking at him and they were trying to take him to the hospital to see if he needed stitches. That's when everybody was clued in they were together, the way they were interacting, how worried she was and hovering over him. After that point, I remember seeing her a lot more backstage, and it made sense from a personal standpoint with Hunter. But then it just morphed into her being someone in creative, then the head of creative, and then just somebody that would pay. She never, as far as my matches or anything I did, ever produced anything, directed anything, handed me a promo. She would be very, very courteous to me. We would say hello. She would ask me what I'm doing today and blah, blah, blah. But that was the extent of it. And if she was with Hunter, I would say hello and get the hell out of there. Because that guy never gave me a good vibe ever.
So what's her role in WWE's version of ECW, if any then? Because if Stephanie's trying to get Sabu to do promos, I don't know if it was at the pay-per-view or, you know, shortly beforehand, and that's why he was written out. But was Stephanie involved at all in WWE ECW?
Yeah, I mean, I saw her there, but she's in the same building as another show that's going on. So the creative, the agents, everybody else, they were kind of pulling double duty. And maybe that's another point. The writers had to work on a third show. Little did they know what they had in store in the next few years. They would have just taken another 1 hour show at this point. But writers, agents / producers, Vince McMahon, Stephanie McMahon, Shane to some point. I don't know when. I can't even tell you if Shane was backstage by this point, because in the beginning, like I talked about at One Night Stand, Shane was supposed to be a big part of that. And of course, you know, during the invasion, he was part of that. And in that part, somehow we should do a poll. Comment below. Which was worse? The WCW ECW invasion with ECW or WWE ECW? It's a tough call.
That is a tough call. We should.
They were both set up to fail. We can agree on that.
Yeah, absolutely. Did Stephanie? This might be an unfair question because obviously she's got to work in every single department. She's basically being groomed along with Shane at some point to take over the company, I guess, when Vince leaves. And ironically, neither one would. In the end, it would actually be more, of all people, The Rock. More than Triple H.
Well, Triple H for a time too.
Yeah.
So that's the odd part. Not even your own daughter is not even having anything to do with operations.
Okay, so this might be an unfair question considering I know you weren't too close to her and what she did, but did she really know what she was doing as far as, you know, creative? Did you value her creative opinions as best as you knew what they were, I guess, at the time? Was she the right person to be heading a creative team in WWE at that point?
Absolutely not. The numbers speak for themselves. The downward trend since she took over. And in retrospect, I believe Vince realized, I don't know when, maybe early, maybe later on when it really, because think about it, after people say it was the sale of WCW and the merger and no competition, that was the beginning. But then creatively, when the McMahons took over, especially Stephanie as a writer, as the head writer, and you have like legitimately trained television writers that have to defer to her, that's kind of, yeah, it's a recipe for failure. The downward trend, the numbers, nothing personal against Stephanie, but the personal part that made it tough, Vince could not fire her. Once he hired her and put her in that spot, how can you hold her accountable? And ultimately, how can you fire your own daughter, your baby girl, from a job that actually you've been grooming her maybe to do? So it could denote not only her failure, but your failure to get her ready for the spot. That's where, I mean, Russo says it all the time, and it's a great point. Booking wrestling is somewhat different than writing a television show. And in this day and age, it's got to be a good mixture of both, leaning on television product, television format, and things like that. For all I know, and this is purely speculation, did Stephanie write this pay-per-view or have a big hand in writing the pay-per-view without having the knowledge that you were going to be 40 plus minutes short? You just put it together, and that was it.
I think from a fan's perspective, mine and others, that I think people always thought that Shane would be the person to take over WWE when Vince said it was time, which obviously he was never going to say it was time unless he was forced out. But then Shane leaves in 2009. He comes back in 2020, 2016. He comes back, and I think he leaves in, was it 2021? Maybe the early 2022.
Well, the Rumble where he tried to politic to book himself to go over in the Rumble. That was the last time we saw him. He got fired. He got released by Vince.
That's exactly the point I'm going to make, is that, hey, Vince did actually fire his own son, although he wasn't groomed in the same way that Stephanie was to, take over the company, I guess, at some point, because they would clash heads constantly, Vince and Shane. But then when Shane apparently did start getting a bit of power and a bit of pull, the first thing he did was try and put himself over on Brock Lesnar. Amazing. But no, he was going to, hang on, I'm just looking at event namesake match in 28 as a face lasting until the final three, but was eliminated by the eventual winner, Brock Lesnar. But yeah, apparently he received enough criticism for that, but then he wanted to win or eliminate Brock Lesnar or something. It's like, and he's nearly 50, and he goes red the second he enters the ring, and sucking wind really badly, but he still wanted to do that. I mean, that was enough to apparently keep him on the payroll because. If memory serves me right, he was still getting paid something like $800,000 or $900,000 a year from the company after he was fired.
Yeah, but I mean, Shane paid his dues as far as the money is concerned, doing everything else. And obviously, he's going to be favored to some degree. Not, there is a double standard when it comes to Shane and Stephanie. And I can see that. You can be a lot more like telling your son, if you're a father, hey, you're being a jerk, you're fired. You're crazy. You can't do that. But if you have a daughter, you're going to be a little bit more subtle about things and try to give them extra chances. And remember, it was a package deal. Stephanie got into the head of creative, and I don't know if it was exactly at the same time, but in the end, or at least in the end of that, Stephanie and Hunter both were in corporate positions of power and also major TV characters together. So if you fire her from creative, what's that going to cause right there? I just thought once she was hired, I was like, there's no way Vince, with the affinity he has for Stephanie and the way he kind of babied her more than Shane. She didn't totally baby her. He still had her pay her dues and do the different jobs, but he was definitely giving her way more grace than he gave Shane. And that's very, very obvious.
Just with Stephanie day to day, I mean, was he you said before she was pretty friendly and everything. Was she... pure business, I guess, or was she, approachable or, affable?
Well, you have to be careful if you're going to approach anybody in the McMahon family about anything. Because you go to her and you go, is there any way I can do? And obviously everybody is trying to get to all of them. So they have to be shielded in some way, like with her, with other writers and Hunter, if he's chief, COO, chief of operations, what are you going to talk to him about? So, that's the kind of thing that made it confusing. Who do you talk to? When do you talk to him? When's the right time to go over the writers' heads and go to Stephanie? Because guess what? You go over their heads, try to get your business done. You better you better make it count, because now the writers are going to have the knives out and never write for you again, or write you into something very, very bad. If you get Stephanie at the wrong time, if you talk to Hunter at the wrong time, God forbid if you catch Vince at the wrong moment, you're done. That's the whole dynamic with that. Now, saying hello, how are you? Thank you for bringing me in. It's cool. What we're doing tonight is really cool. Thanks. I'll be available all day. That's the professional business part of it. Stephanie would never be like, how should I say, Shane hanging out with the boys and catering, getting in the ring, doing whatever. Shane, Stephanie, I think Stephanie and Hunter's approach to having somewhat of being shielded from the talent was good. Shane was one of the boys. But then again, I think Stephanie was more put in creative because she may have more sensible approach to certain angles and story. Think about what Shane has done as a competitor. Shane loves the big stunts. Shane loves the hardcore stuff. Remember on Raw Underground? Shane loves MMA and street fights and octagon type stuff. I don't think Shane had the mind for the 80s wrestling storytelling that Stephanie and Hunter did. Not saying they were great, but they had more of their pulse on how to tell a long-term story. But you would go to Shane to say, you know what would be cool? You come back with that.
One more thing. Was there anyone aside from Sabu who, Stephanie singled out or wasn't a fan of?
I would probably guess if she laid eyes on Balls Mahoney and didn't get it. Vince loved it and then he didn't. She may not have gotten it. And I can't say that Stephanie did too much writing that I knew about. Like you said, did she ever come up to you and tell you, you're doing this? This is what we wrote promo-wise. Now, she might have wrote Sabu's promo, which I would love to have read before he tore it up, because this is Sabu cutting a promo trying to sound like Stephanie McMahon. That's what I would guess. Nobody can write the voice. That's why, like Steve Austin, a lot of times, give me the bullet points, and I'll say it with my words and in my voice. And that's what's missing today from wrestling.